There's a particular kind of darkness that only exists on back roads, not the darkness of a city at night. That kind has color in it, neon, headlights, the orange bleed of a street lamp 2 blocks away. City darkness is never really dark. I'm talking about the other kind. The kind where you hold your hand up in front of your face and you can't see your fingers, where the tree line disappears and the sky disappears and there's no horizon anymore, just black pressing in from every direction. That's the darkness Marcus walked into on a Thursday night in October. He didn't know when he climbed into that cab that the 2 men sitting beside him had been riding that same stretch of road for over 2 decades. He didn't know the driver had been behind that wheel just as long. He didn't know any of it, and maybe that's the only reason he made it home. This is the story of one night on Old Harlan Road, told from the inside.
TheSpiritvox, it's alive.
Marcus Ellison was not a superstitious man. He was 36 years old, worked in freight logistics for a mid-sized company out of Chattanooga, and spent most of his professional life solving problems that had nothing to do with the supernatural. Delayed shipments, miscounted pallets, the occasional truck driver who disappeared for 3 days and came back smelling like Louisiana. He was practical, methodical, the kind of man who kept a paper map in his glove compartment because, as he put it, satellites go down, paper doesn't, which made it all the more ironic that on the night in question, it was the paper map he couldn't find and the dead phone he couldn't charge that left him standing alone on the shoulder of Old Harlan Road at 12:40 in the morning. His rental car had died 6 miles back. Not dramatically, no smoke, no bang, just a quiet shudder and then nothing. He'd coasted to a stop on the gravel shoulder and sat there for a full minute, waiting for it to start up again, the way you sometimes wait for a computer to fix itself. It didn't. His phone had been at 4% when he left the highway. By the time he'd figured out the car wasn't coming back, it was gone. He'd been walking for almost an hour. The nearest town, if you could call it that. It was really just a cluster of addresses that had agreed to share a zip code, was another 3 miles north. Marcus knew this because he'd passed the sign on his drive-in, population 340, Elmore Crossing. He had not passed a single open business, not a gas station, not a diner, not even a vending machine in a parking lot. Just a shuttered bait shop, a church with a hand-painted sign, and a row of houses with their lights off. He kept walking. The thing about Old Harlan Road that you have to understand, and this is something locals know but outsiders don't, is that the road doesn't follow the logic you'd expect. It curves when it should go straight. It dips into hollows where the fog pools even on clear nights. The pine trees on either side grow so close to the shoulder that in your headlights they look like walls. On foot, in the dark, it feels like walking through a tunnel that keeps moving. Marcus told me later. We spoke twice, once by phone and once in person, and he was consistent both times that around the 40-minute mark of his walk, he started to feel like he wasn't alone. Not a sound, not a footstep, just a feeling. The way the air changes when someone enters a room, even if you don't hear the door. He said he looked back twice, both times, nothing, just road and trees and dark. He told himself it was the isolation doing what isolation does, making the brain manufacture threats because the brain hates a vacuum. He kept his eyes forward and walked faster, and then the headlights appeared behind him. They were amber-tinted, older bulbs, not the blue-white of modern cars. They came around the long curve slowly, unhurried, and Marcus stepped closer to the shoulder and raised his hand. The car slowed. It was a cab. Yellow, though the yellow had faded to something closer to cream. A Crown Victoria, maybe early 2000s. No company insignia on the door, just a handwritten phone number on a strip of masking tape on the mirror. The kind of cab that operates outside the app, outside the registry, the kind that runs on reputation and word of mouth in small towns. The window rolled down. The driver was a broad man, somewhere between 50 and 60, with a face like worn leather and a cap pulled low over gray eyes. He looked at Marcus the way you look at something you've seen before, not curious, just confirming. Where you headed? Marcus named the intersection Route 41 and Miller Creek Road, where there was a motel he'd seen on the drive-in. About 8 miles north. The driver quoted him a price, cash only. Marcus had $23 in his wallet. He said yes. He reached for the back door, and that's when he saw them. 2 men, already in the back seat, one at each window, which meant the middle seat was the only space left. Marcus hesitated for just a moment. Not fear, he said. More like social calculation, the awkwardness of squeezing between 2 strangers. But it was almost 1 in the morning, and he was 6 miles from a dead car on a road with no lights. He got in. The 2 men didn't acknowledge him, didn't shift, didn't glance over, didn't do the small bodily renegotiation that people normally do when a third person joins them in a confined space. They just sat, still, facing forward. Marcus buckled his seatbelt, a habit, and the cab pulled back onto the road. For a while, he watched the trees, tried to track landmarks, counted the mile markers when they appeared in the headlights. The silence was unusual, he said. Not uncomfortable exactly, more like the silence had a texture, like it wasn't the absence of noise, but the presence of something else. He looked sideways once, toward the man on his left. The man was looking at him. Not staring, not aggressive, just watching. With an expression Marcus struggled to describe, he used the word patient, the way someone looks when they are waiting for something they know is coming. Marcus looked away, watched the road, started doing math in his head, inventory numbers from work, anything to occupy the part of his brain that was starting to send up signals he didn't want to examine too closely. The cab slowed. The driver said, "Miller Creek Road. This your stop?" Marcus reached into his jacket pocket for his wallet. His jacket pocket was empty. He tried the other side, his jeans, the inner pocket, the small flat pocket at the hip. He patted himself down the way you do when you're sure you're missing something, trying each location twice, then a third time. His wallet was gone, his work badge, his backup card, the one he kept in a separate pocket specifically so it wouldn't be in his wallet. Even the loose single he'd folded and tucked into the coin pocket of his jeans that morning. All of it, gone. He hadn't felt a thing. Marcus looked up at the driver. He started to speak, started to explain, started to accuse, and the driver turned around, and Marcus stopped. He said the driver's face was normal, completely, ordinarily normal. But the eyes struggled with this part. Both times we spoke, he kept reaching for the right words and not quite finding them. The closest he got was this. It was like looking into a window of a house where all the lights are off. The window's still there. You can see the glass, but there's nothing on the other side. The driver spoke. "Those boys been working this road a long time, 20-some years near as I can figure. Old habits. You know how it is." Marcus said, "What? Who are you talking about? I need to call the police. Those men took my—" "They're gone," the driver said. "They always go." Marcus turned to look. The back seat was empty. Both doors were closed. He hadn't heard them open. He turned back to the driver. "This cab flipped on a wet road in October of 2003, the driver said. Conversational, like he was giving directions. Right around the bend back there at mile marker 9. Killed all 3 of us on impact, the report said. I was the driver. They were my last fare. I don't know why I keep coming back. I've thought about it a lot, and I don't have a good answer. Maybe some things just keep moving after they stop, like a watch that's been wound too tight." He turned back to face forward. "I can't give you your things back. That's not how it works. But you're at your stop and you're whole. That's more than most get when those two are involved." Marcus said the temperature in the cab dropped, not gradually, instantly, like a door opened onto winter. He got out. He didn't run. He said his legs didn't work well enough to run. He just stepped back from the cab and stood on the shoulder of the road and watched it. For a moment it just sat there, engine running, amber headlights on. Then the lights went out, and it was gone, not driving away, gone, like the road had swallowed it. Marcus stood there for 4 minutes by his own count. Then he started walking toward the motel sign he could see up ahead, its neon cast in pink light on the asphalt, and he focused on that light with everything he had. He checked in with no ID and no card. The night clerk, a teenager, half asleep, took one look at him and didn't ask questions. Marcus sat on the edge of the motel bed and stared at the wall until sunrise. If you were to search the Whitfield County Gazette archives, the print edition, not online, because the online archive only goes back to 2008, you would find, in the October 14, 2003 issue, a brief article on page 7, 11 sentences, no photograph. The headline reads, "3 dead in single vehicle accident on Old Harlan Road." The article identifies 2 of the 3 victims as Daniel Pruitt, 28, and Coleman Ray Voss, 31, both of Dalton, Georgia. It describes them as known to local law enforcement, a phrase that newspapers use when they want to say something without saying it. What they were known for, specifically, was a 15-year run of petty theft that had never quite risen to the level that would put them away for any significant time. Pickpocketing mostly, small cons, the kind of crimes that require a certain talent for stillness, for patience, for making themselves invisible in plain sight. By all accounts, they were very good at it. And here is where I want you to think about something. We talk about hauntings like they're about location. The house is haunted. The road is haunted. The old building where something terrible happened. But what if it's not about location? What if it's about pattern? Danny Pruitt had been picking pockets since he was 11 years old. Learned from an uncle who'd learned it from someone else, a skill passed down like a family trade. By the time he was in his 20s, it was less a choice than a reflex. He didn't do it for the money, not always. Sometimes there was no money. Sometimes he'd take a receipt, a business card, a folded piece of paper with a grocery list on it and no cash value whatsoever. He did it because it was the thing he knew how to do. Cole Voss was quieter, more deliberate. Where Danny was instinct, Cole was method. He was the one who read a mark, chose the moment, created the distraction. They'd been working together since their mid-20s, and by the time the accident happened, they operated like a single organism. No signals needed, no conversation, just shared awareness, moving in sync. Witnesses who'd encountered them over the years, and I spoke to two, both of whom asked not to be named, described the same thing. You never felt them. One moment your wallet was there, the next it wasn't, and they were always already somewhere else. After the accident, something changed, and something didn't. What changed? The body, the breath, the heartbeat, the ability to cast a shadow in the right light, to leave footprints, to be seen on a security camera. All of that went away in October of 2003 on the wet curve at mile marker 9. What didn't change? Everything else. The patience, the stillness, the way of sitting beside someone without registering as a threat, the hands that moved without being felt. People along Old Harlan Road, the ones who'd lived there long enough and paid attention, had been noticing it for years before Marcus came along. A woman named Darlene, who'd lived in the same house a quarter-mile off Harlan Road for 30 years, told me she'd stopped taking the road at night sometime around 2005. Not because anything had happened to her, because of what happened to her nephew. He'd hitched a ride late one night. This was before rideshare, when hitching was still something people did in rural Georgia, and arrived home missing his wallet, his watch, and a small folding knife he'd carried for years. He said he'd been in the car with two large men who never spoke. He said the driver had said something strange when he dropped him off, something about those two, and then the car was gone. Darlene had heard variations of the same story 3 times after that, from 3 different people who'd traveled that road. Always 2 men, always in the back seat, always the silent patient watching, always the missing items. The thing that strikes me, the thing I keep turning over, is that Danny and Cole don't seem to know. Or maybe they know and it doesn't register as different from what came before. Because what came before was also moving through the world quietly, taking things, disappearing before anyone could ask questions. They didn't change when they died. They just became harder to catch. Of the 3, the driver is the one I find most difficult. Not because he's the most frightening. By most accounts, he doesn't do anything harmful. He drives. He answers questions when asked. He sometimes says more than you expect him to. He's difficult because of the particular shape of his situation. His name, according to the 2003 accident report, was Earl William Marsh, 54 years old. He'd been driving a cab in and around Whitfield County for 22 years at the time of the accident. Licensed, registered, insured, every box checked. By all available accounts, a reliable driver with no incidents on his record. He was working a late shift when he picked up Danny and Cole. There's no record of where they were going. In those days, a lot of cab trips in that area were cash and informal, no digital record, no GPS log. The accident was attributed to speed on a wet road, a curve he'd driven hundreds of times. The report noted that all 3 died on impact. The cab was totaled. It was towed to a salvage yard outside Dalton, where it sat for 2 years before being sold for parts. And yet, multiple people over the years have described the same car, cream yellow Crown Victoria, masking tape on the mirror, driver with a cap and gray eyes who speaks in short sentences and doesn't ask unnecessary questions. A woman named Patricia, who teaches at an elementary school and was stranded on Harlan Road in 2011 after a flat tire, told me she accepted a ride from a cab that matched the description exactly. The driver took her 5 miles north to where her husband was waiting. She said he charged her $6, spoke only twice, once to confirm her destination, once to say, "Good luck." When she got out, and that she found the ride unremarkable except for one thing. She said she looked back to wave as the cab pulled away, and she watched it drive to the first bend in the road, and on the other side of the bend, there were no taillights. She assumed he'd turned off somewhere. She didn't think about it again for 3 years, until she heard a similar story from a colleague who'd traveled the same road. When you piece together the accounts, and there are more than a dozen if you're patient enough to find them, scattered across years and conversations and one local Facebook group that has since been deleted, a picture of Earl Marsh emerges that is, in its own way, quietly heartbreaking. He doesn't hurt anyone. He just drives, late nights, same road, same stretch between where the accident happened and a radius of about 12 miles in either direction. He stops for people who need a ride. He takes them where they're going. He charges a fair price, which no one can pay because no one ever has any money left by the time they arrive. He doesn't seem distressed by this, or if he is, it doesn't show. What shows in the accounts of the people who've encountered him and had the presence of mind to ask him questions is something closer to resignation. The calm of a man who has processed something terrible and come to a kind of peace with it that doesn't require resolution. One man, a long-haul trucker named Roy, who found himself without a working truck at 2 in the morning in 2016, described a conversation with the driver that lasted about 15 minutes. Roy said he hadn't been frightened, not at first, not during the ride. He'd been frightened only afterward, when he'd done the math. He told me Earl had talked about driving the way other people talk about breathing, not as a choice, as a condition. "Some people drink," Roy quoted him as saying. "Some people pray. I drive. It's the one thing I know how to do where my brain goes quiet. I don't think I know how to stop." Roy said he'd thought that was a pretty relatable thing to say. He'd said something like, "Yeah, I get that," and Earl had nodded, and they'd driven the rest of the way in comfortable silence. Roy said he lost his wallet somewhere in the back seat. He laughed when he told me that. He said, "Can't even be mad about it. Those guys have been at it since before I was driving this route. It's practically a toll booth at this point." I asked Roy if he'd go back. If he found himself on Old Harlan Road at night, broken down, would he get in the cab again? He thought about it for a second. Then he said, "I mean, he got me where I was going, didn't he? I've been thinking about that answer for a long time. What do you owe a thing that harms you a little and helps you more? What do you make of a haunting where the ghost isn't trying to scare you? He's just trying to finish his shift?" I don't have a clean answer. I'm not sure there is one.
TheSpiritvox. It's alive.
Marcus replaced his wallet. It took 2 weeks and 4 phone calls and a trip to the DMV, but he got there. He never went back to Old Harlan Road, not because he was told not to, not because anyone warned him, but because some experiences leave a seam in you. A place where the two halves of your life, before and after, don't quite meet flush, he said to me near the end of our second conversation. I don't know what I believe now. I believed one set of things before that night. Now I believe a different set of things. I'm not sure either set is completely right. I think that's the most honest thing a person can say after an encounter they can't explain. Not, "I believe in ghosts." Not, I don't believe in ghosts. Just, I know what I saw, and it changed the shape of what I think is possible. There are still cabs on Old Harlan Road, legitimate ones, with apps and GPS and credit card readers. Whitfield County has modernized like everywhere else. But late at night, on the stretch between mile marker 6 and mile marker 14, where the pines grow close and the road dips, and the fog sometimes pools even when there's no reason for fog, people still lose things. And sometimes if you're stranded and it's late and the headlights are amber yellow and the driver doesn't say much, check your pockets before you get out. This has been TheSpiritvox. I'm your host. Whatever you believe, stay careful out there.